Fall in Madison, Wisconsin brought with it the crisp scent of turning leaves and the golden hue of early sunrises that glowed through apartment windows just before 6 a.m. for Rachel Miller. However, fall was the busiest time of year cold season. Meant more visits, more long shifts, more people to care for, and barely enough hours in the day to rest. As a night shift nurse at St. Vincent's Hospital, Rachel's days technically ended when most people's began. But the second she stepped through the door of their modest two-bedroom apartment after a 12-hour shift, her real day began with her son. Her feet throbbed as she stepped out of her scrubs, her lower back aching from hours on her feet. But Rachel didn't rest. She tied her frizzy brown hair into a bun again, rolled up the sleeves of her sweater, and moved to the kitchen. The apartment was small, lived-in. The couch worn from countless late-night movies with her son Ethan. The walls decorated with his colorful artwork and achievement certificates. A loving, lived-in home. She opened the fridge bare bones but functional and began preparing Ethan's lunch today. She made his favorite, a turkey sandwich on whole wheat, a few slices of tomato and lettuce tucked inside. Thin slices, carefully arranged. She added a sliced apple sprinkled with a little lemon juice to keep it from browning, a cup of yogurt, and finally a homemade oatmeal cookie she had baked the night before, after getting home from work and before collapsing into bed. It wasn't gourmet, but every part of it was made with love. This was her morning ritual, sacred and quiet. The soft patter of pajama-clad feet interrupted her thoughts. Ethan, still rubbing the sleep from his big brown eyes, shuffled into the kitchen. His hair stood up in all directions and his Spider-Man pajama pants were twisted at the ankles. He looked up at her and grinned. "Good morning, Mom," he mumbled, his arms wrapping gently around her waist. Rachel's exhaustion cracked. Just a little, and she smiled down at him. "Good morning, baby. Turkey sandwich today, your favorite." He beamed. "You stayed up late to make cookies again, didn't you?" She chuckled, brushing flour off his cheek with her knuckle. "Well, moms can be night owls too, you know." In truth, she had nearly fallen asleep at the kitchen table waiting for the cookies to bake. But Ethan didn't need to know that. He had enough to carry already. It had been 2 years since the divorce, 2 years since Michael had packed his bags and told her she'd never manage alone. Rachel still remembered those words, bitter and sharp. "You'll never be able to raise our son properly, not on a nurse's salary. Not with your kind of life." But Ethan had proven him wrong. Last year, he had won the state math competition, his picture in the Wisconsin Tribune, his smile missing a front tooth and brighter than any trophy. His teachers spoke about him with awe, mentioning the potential for scholarships, gifted programs, maybe even early college. Rachel couldn't have been prouder. Not because of the accolades, but because she knew what they meant, proof that her love and sacrifice hadn't been in vain. "What class are you excited about today?" she asked as she sealed the lunchbox. "Science. We're doing chemical reaction experiments," Ethan said, but his expression flickered something off, just for a second. A shadow passed behind his eyes. Rachel paused. "You okay, kiddo?"
He nodded quickly. "Yeah, just lunchtime's been kind of
boring." Before she could press, he changed the subject. "Will you be home tonight? In the morning. But I'm off Friday night, so we'll do dinner, I promise." Their apartment wasn't fancy. The carpet was threadbare in places, the furniture mostly hand-me-downs. But it was filled with warmth. The refrigerator was plastered with report cards and Ethan's spelling bee ribbons. On a shelf above the TV sat a ceramic dolphin he made in art class, proudly painted in streaky blue and white as Ethan slung on his backpack and ran toward the door to catch the school bus. Rachel kissed his cheek and handed him the lunchbox. "I love you." "I love you too, Mom." And just like that, he was gone. Rachel stood at the doorway for a moment, an unease settling in her chest. Her motherly instinct, it was rarely wrong, whispered something was changing in her son. Subtle shifts. He didn't bounce out the door like he used to. His laugh, once bright and frequent, had quieted. His eyes lingered on her face longer, as though watching her more carefully, that evening. When Rachel returned home after another long shift, she dropped her bag and glanced over. to the kitchen table where Ethan sat working on math problems. He looked up with a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Welcome home, Mom." She forced a cheerful tone. "Thanks, buddy." She moved toward his lunchbox. It sat neatly where she always told him to leave it, but when she opened it, her heart sank. The sandwich was untouched. The apple hadn't been eaten. Only the cookie was missing, half-eaten at that. "You didn't eat again?" she asked as calmly as possible. Ethan shrugged without looking up from his homework. "I wasn't hungry. You feeling sick?" "No, I had a snack earlier, that's all." Rachel's concern deepened. Ethan rarely had snacks. They didn't have the money for cafeteria food, and he knew not to take spending cash to school. Something didn't add up. She decided not to press further. Instead, she made his favorite for dinner, mac and cheese with extra cheese and steamed broccoli. She watched as he picked at his plate, forcing down a few bites before excusing himself to finish homework. That night, lying in bed, Rachel couldn't sleep. Her exhaustion was bone deep, but her mind was alive with worry. Ethan was changing.
His appetite had dwindled. He had become quieter.
His once proud smile dimmed. And he was lying. He never lied. The next morning, she packed an even more special lunch. Peanut butter and jam on his favorite honey wheat bread, cheese sticks, banana bread. She added a note inside. "Have a great day, Ethan. Love you always." "Mom," but when she handed him the lunchbox, he hesitated. "You don't have to work so hard on my lunches, Mom." Her heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "Nothing," he mumbled, then turned away, leaving for school before she could question further. That night, once again, the lunchbox returned full. Friday evening finally arrived, her only day shift of the week. Determined to connect, she made Ethan's favorite mashed potatoes and grilled chicken. They sat together at the table as dusk settled outside the window. "Ethan, has anything changed at school?" He shook his head. "Are you making new friends?" "No, not really. Lunchtime. Do you eat with everyone else?" He froze, his fork hovering over his potatoes. "Sort of." Rachel leaned in. "If you're not eating your lunch, should we try the school lunch?" "No." His voice snapped louder than expected. "I want your lunch. I just haven't been hungry." The outburst startled her. Ethan wasn't one to yell. Not even during tantrums as a toddler. Something deeper was going on. That weekend, while shopping at the local store, Rachel ran into Carol Hamilton, the mother of Ethan's classmate Ryan. Carol was cheerful as always, pushing a cart of organic veggies. "Hey, Rachel, how's Ethan doing?" "Ryan said he seems a little down lately." Rachel's stomach tightened. "Down? Really?" Carol nodded sympathetically. "Yeah, I'm sure it's nothing. Kids go through moods." But Ryan said, "Ethan eats alone sometimes. Doesn't really talk during lunch." That night, Rachel walked past Ethan's bedroom. The door was slightly open. He sat at his desk, his pencil in hand, math book open, but he wasn't writing. He was just staring out the window. A heaviness clung to his little frame. Rachel knocked softly. "May I come in?" He jumped and scrambled to look busy. "Yeah." She sat on his bed. "Ethan, you know you can talk to me about anything, right?"
He hesitated. His lower lip trembled. "Mom, is it my fault?"
"What?" "That Dad left." Rachel's breath caught. "Because maybe if I was a better kid." No, no, she whispered, gathering him in her arms. "You did nothing wrong. That was between your father and me. You are my everything. You hear me? You're why I wake up, why I work, why I smile." He nodded slowly, but Rachel sensed the storm inside him hadn't fully passed. By Monday, she could no longer hold her silence. After Ethan left for school, she dialed his teacher. "Mrs. Carpenter." "Hello, Mrs. Carpenter. This is Rachel, Ethan's mom. I wanted to talk about something." "Of course. Is something wrong?" "Well, I've noticed he's not eating lunch, and he seems quieter." Mrs. Carpenter hesitated. "His focus in class is excellent, but yes. I have noticed he's withdrawn, less social. Has anything happened that I should know about?" "Not that I can say with certainty. But I'll keep a closer eye and let you know if anything surfaces." Rachel hung up, feeling even more uneasy. Her gut told her something was terribly wrong, but no one seemed to know what, that evening. As Ethan did homework again, he suddenly said, "Mom, am I not normal?" Rachel turned from the stove, startled. "What? I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm different." "You are different. You're special. Why would you think otherwise?" He didn't answer, just returned to his math problems. But his shoulders seemed heavier than a child should ever bear. Rachel sat in the kitchen, her spoon stirring a pot long after it stopped boiling, her mind circling back to the same question over and over. What was happening to her son? Wednesday afternoon arrived under a dull gray sky, and Rachel sat in the hospital break room nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee. Her body screamed for rest, but her mind wouldn't stop spiraling. Her coworkers chatted quietly nearby, but she was barely present, her thoughts looping back to Ethan's sad eyes, to that lunchbox returning home untouched for the fourth day in a row. She rubbed her temples and leaned back against the stiff vinyl couch, hoping for a few minutes of sleep before her night shift began. But just as her eyelids began to fall, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the caller ID, Madison Elementary School. Her heart instantly began to race. "Hello? This is Rachel Miller." "Mrs. Miller, this is Mr. Johnson. I'm a fifth-grade teacher at Madison Elementary." "I don't believe we've met." "But I teach the class next to your son, Ethan's." Rachel straightened, gripping her phone tighter. "Yes, I know who you are. Is something wrong?" "I'm calling about Ethan. He's physically fine, please don't panic, but we need to speak with you right away. It's urgent." Her breath caught. "What happened? Did something happen to him?" "He's safe. But something serious has come to light. I believe it would be best to discuss it in person. Could you come to the school as soon as possible?" Rachel's blood turned cold. She stood abruptly, drawing glances from two other nurses in the break room. "Yes, I'll leave right now." 10 minutes later, after explaining to her supervisor and getting emergency leave, Rachel was rushing through traffic, every stoplight a fresh wave of anxiety. The entire drive, her mind surged with possibilities. Had Ethan gotten in trouble? Had someone hurt him? Had he finally broken under the weight of whatever pain he'd been hiding? When she arrived at the school, the front desk receptionist looked at her with a subdued, sympathetic expression. "The principal is expecting you. Please follow me." Rachel's heels echoed down the polished linoleum floors as she was led to the principal's office. Inside, Principal Anderson sat with a tight, drawn face. Mr. Johnson was also there. Along with Ethan's homeroom teacher, Mrs. Carpenter, her usual confident expression was replaced by something pale, shaken, almost afraid. Rachel's stomach flipped. "Mrs. Miller," Principal Anderson began, her voice calm but strained. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. First, let me reassure you, Ethan is safe and currently resting in the nurse's office. However, a very serious situation has come to our attention, and we felt it was necessary to involve you immediately." Rachel nodded, sinking into the offered chair, her hands clenched. Mr. Johnson leaned forward. "Earlier today, I found Ethan crying alone in the hallway during lunch break. I tried speaking with him, but he couldn't explain what was wrong. His distress was deeply concerning. So I asked to review school camera footage from the past couple days." The principal opened a laptop on the desk and turned it toward Rachel. "What you are about to see may be upsetting, but we felt you had the right to know exactly what occurred." Rachel leaned forward as the screen began to play. It was footage from inside a classroom, Ethan's class. She recognized the desks, the posters on the walls, the tall windows that let in fall light. Then she saw Mrs. Carpenter standing at the front, gesturing toward Ethan's lunchbox. "Today," Mrs. Carpenter's voice came through clearly, "we're going to learn about nutrition by comparing different types of meals." Rachel's breath caught as she saw her son squirm in his seat. Mrs. Carpenter walked toward Ethan's desk, lifted his lunchbox and held it up. "This," she announced to the class, "is an example of a poorly balanced lunch. Let's take a look. White bread, processed turkey slices, a cookie high in sugar." Children's voices whispered, snickered. Rachel's heart sank. Single-parent households often face challenges in meal preparation. Mrs. Carpenter continued, her tone professional but cold. "Parents are busy, working multiple jobs. Unfortunately, that can lead to nutritional neglect. Does that mean Ethan's poor? A boy's voice asked off-screen. You shouldn't say it like that. Mrs. Carpenter replied, but yes, socioeconomic challenges do contribute to poor food quality. Rachel stared, frozen, as her son stared at his desk, his small fists clenched. Around him, children began to laugh. One boy, Brayden, if she remembered correctly, leaned over and sneered something to Ethan, though the words were too low to hear. The footage cut to another angle, showing Ethan bolting from the room. The video jumped again. Now the hallway. Ethan rushing into a bathroom stall. And then, nothing but the quiet sound of sobbing behind a closed door. Rachel's vision blurred. She hadn't realized she was crying until her breath hitched in her throat. Her hands gripped her lap so hard. Her knuckles turned white. I had no idea this was happening, she whispered. We understand, the principal said softly. Mr. Johnson brought this to our attention just today. He's also expressed previous concerns about Mrs. Carpenter's conduct. Rachel turned to the teacher. Why? Mrs. Carpenter's voice was faint. I didn't mean to embarrass him. It was a teaching moment. I didn't think. You didn't think? Rachel's voice rose, raw. You used my child's lunch something I made with love after working all night as a public example of poverty and failure. The room fell silent. You humiliated him. You invited bullying. You made him feel ashamed of me, of us. Mr. Johnson nodded gravely. I've witnessed several questionable comments in the past, but I had no solid proof until now. Rachel stood. I want to see my son, now. The nurse's office was quiet when Rachel entered, her footsteps muffled on the linoleum. Ethan sat on a cot, his knees pulled to his chest. He looked up as the door opened, and the moment he saw her.
His eyes filled. I'm sorry, he said immediately.
Mom, I didn't mean to get in trouble. Oh, baby, no. No. Rachel rushed to him and dropped to her knees beside the cot, pulling him into her arms. You didn't do anything wrong. None of this is your fault.
Tears spilled
from his eyes as he clutched her shirt. I didn't want you to know. Why not? Because you work so hard. You make my lunches even when you're tired. I didn't want to make you feel bad. Rachel cradled him tighter. You could never make me feel bad. Ethan, all I care about is that you're okay. That night, at home, they sat together on the couch. Ethan's head rested on her lap, and Rachel ran her fingers through his hair. Mom, I didn't stop eating lunch because I wasn't hungry, he confessed. It's because every time I opened the box, Brayden and the others laughed.
They
called it poor kid lunch. Mrs. Carpenter said stuff too. That single moms can't make healthy food, so I just stopped. I didn't want to be different. Rachel's heart ached. But you kept making them, and I didn't want to tell you, because your lunches aren't bad. They're the best part of my day. She kissed his forehead, her tears silent but steady. You are not less than any of those kids, and I'm going to make sure they never make you feel that way again. The next morning, Rachel didn't go to work. She headed straight to the school board office. She waited calmly in the lobby until she was ushered into a conference room with education supervisor, Mrs. Davis, a woman with graying hair and a composed face. I'm here regarding a very serious matter involving a teacher at Madison Elementary, Rachel said, placing a voice recorder on the table. For transparency, I'm recording this conversation. Mrs. Davis nodded, folding her hands. We've received a report from the school already. We're aware of what occurred. Then I assume disciplinary action is being taken? Mrs. Carpenter's conduct violated our code of ethics. We're initiating a transfer, and she will no longer be teaching in a general classroom. Additionally, we're launching mandatory diversity and ethics training across the district. Rachel listened. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was a start. That afternoon, she returned to the school for a scheduled meeting with the parents of Brayden Thornton. Marcus and Elizabeth Thornton were well known in town. Marcus was a senior partner at a top law firm. Elizabeth sat on the board of a local children's charity. Double quotes, Mrs. Miller. Marcus said, his tone brisk. We understand your son and ours had a misunderstanding. We hope we can put this matter to rest quickly. Rachel blinked. A misunderstanding? Elizabeth chimed in. Children say things. Brayden didn't mean any harm. Your son told mine his lunch was for poor kids. He laughed at him. He repeated what a teacher said, but he chose to be cruel. Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. Statistically, Rachel slammed her hand on the table. Don't quote me statistics. My son is not a case study. He's a human being, and he was humiliated. The principal nodded slowly. Mr. and Mrs. Thornton, this meets the criteria for targeted bullying. Marcus's expression soured. What do you expect us to do? I expect your son to apologize, Rachel said calmly. And not just that. He needs to understand what he did and promise to do better. That evening, Rachel and Ethan returned to the school library where Brayden and his parents were waiting. Brayden looked resentful, staring at the floor, but his father nudged him forward. I'm sorry, Brayden muttered. Sorry for saying bad stuff about your lunch. Ethan looked uncertain, glancing up at Rachel. She gave a small nod. I'm sorry I got mad too, Ethan said. But please don't say stuff like that again, Brayden shuffled. Okay, also, actually I think your cookies look really good. Everyone blinked in surprise. Rachel tried not to laugh. You can ask your mom to make them too, Ethan offered shyly. Maybe, or you could bring me one. The tension in the room broke, just a little. Rachel stood taller, wrapping an arm around her son. It wasn't over, but maybe, just maybe, things were beginning to change. The next week at Madison Elementary felt different. Whispers of what had occurred with Ethan and the infamous lunch incident lingered like smoke in the halls. Though the administration remained discreet, the story had made its way through faculty lounges, PTA group chats, and student grapevines alike. Mrs. Carpenter had been quietly transferred. And in her place arrived a new teacher, Miss Isabella Rodriguez, a young woman in her late 20s with bright eyes, a warm voice, and a classroom decorated with posters celebrating inclusivity, kindness, and courage. Rachel had heard about her even before their official introduction. Nancy, a co-worker at the hospital, had a cousin whose child had once been in Miss Rodriguez's class. She's the kind of teacher who doesn't just teach the curriculum, Nancy had said. She teaches hearts. It was early Monday morning when Ethan stood by the door, clutching his new lunchbox with careful fingers. He wore his navy blue hoodie, the one Rachel had saved up for after 2 extra shifts, and his new sneakers that still squeaked on tile floors. In his bag was a turkey sandwich with fresh lettuce, apple slices dusted with cinnamon, and a carefully wrapped oatmeal cookie. You ready? Rachel asked as she knelt in front of him, fixing his collar. Ethan nodded, his gaze uncertain. Do you think it'll be okay now? Rachel tucked a stray lock of hair behind his ear. I do. But if anything feels wrong, you talk to me, okay? We're a team. Team Miller, Ethan said with a half smile. The world's strongest team. The school bus honked softly outside, and Ethan climbed aboard, his small hand waving through the window until it disappeared from sight. Rachel stood at the door for a long moment, watching the empty street, the autumn leaves tumbling in spirals across the sidewalk. She didn't know exactly what the day would bring, but she knew she had set something into motion. The silence was broken. The truth had stepped into the hallway, and there was no going back. At school, Miss Rodriguez began the day with a story. She stood at the front of the room and addressed the class with gentle confidence. Before we begin math today, I want to talk to you all about something important: our differences. Families come in all shapes and sizes. Some of us live with both parents. Some live with just one. Some live with grandparents. Some have 2 moms or 2 dads. What matters is love. And every single family in this classroom is valuable. Understood? The class nodded. Double quote. Good. Because in this classroom no one will ever be judged for what their family looks like, or what's in their lunchbox, or the clothes they wear. Ethan stared down at his desk, then slowly looked up. Miss Rodriguez's eyes met his. She gave him a small, reassuring smile. At lunch, Ethan hesitated for only a moment before opening his lunchbox. He peeled back the foil on his sandwich and took a bite. The apple slices were still crisp. He picked up the cookie and nibbled the edge.
He didn't notice at first, but Brayden was watching him. Hey, Braden said, nudging closer.
That your mom's cookies again? Ethan stiffened. Braden scratched.
His head. Can I have a piece? Ethan blinked.
You want my cookie? Braden shrugged. It always smells good. Ethan broke it in half and handed it over cautiously. Braden took a bite, and his eyes widened. Whoa, okay. I take back everything I said. This is like bakery level. Ethan laughed, just a little, from across the room. Miss Rodriguez observed the exchange with a smile. That afternoon, Rachel received a message from the school office. Ethan had volunteered to speak at Friday's family diversity presentation. Surprised, she reread the email twice. When Ethan came home, she didn't mention it right away, curious if he'd bring it up himself. He did. Just before dinner, Miss Rodriguez asked if I wanted to talk about our family for the presentation. Rachel set the pot of macaroni and cheese on the table. And? I said yes. She paused, turning to look at him. You did? Yeah, I thought maybe if I told people what you do for me, maybe they'd understand. Rachel walked over and placed her hands gently on his shoulders. Ethan, that's brave. I just want people to know. I'm not ashamed anymore. Rachel felt a swelling in her chest that she couldn't name. Pride? Gratitude? It was all tangled up with love. That night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Rachel sat at the kitchen table with her nursing textbooks spread out before her. She was studying for a professional certification exam, a decision she'd made a month ago to increase her income. But tonight she barely focused on the pages. Her mind kept drifting to her son, to the little boy who had spent weeks carrying a secret hurt so deep that he starved himself to hide it. And now he was stepping forward. On Friday morning, Rachel left work early and arrived at school just in time for the 5th grade assembly. The multi-purpose room was decorated with drawings, collages, and banners made by students. On one wall, a giant sign read, "Every family is unique, every family is love." Parents filled the rows of folding chairs, and the buzz of chatter filled the space. Rachel found a seat near the back, nervous despite herself, when the lights dimmed. Miss Rodriguez introduced the students one by one. Some spoke about their grandparents raising them. Others shared stories of being adopted, of living in 2 houses because of divorce, of siblings with disabilities. There was laughter, applause, a few teary eyes. Then Ethan stepped onto the stage. He stood in front of the microphone, small and steady, his note cards trembling slightly in his hands. He looked out into the crowd and found Rachel's face. She smiled at him and he began to speak. My name is Ethan Miller. I live with my mom. She's a nurse and she works the night shift. That means she helps people when they're hurt or are sick, sometimes while everyone else is sleeping. He paused and took a breath. Even when she's tired, she makes me lunch every morning. She always says lunch isn't just food, it's love. She puts in apples because I like the crunch. She puts in cookies because she says everyone needs sweetness in their day. I used to feel different because I didn't have 2 parents. But now I know families are different everywhere. What matters is that someone loves you and tries hard for you. My mom is my family, and I'm proud of her. The room was silent. Then applause broke out, genuine, resounding, heartfelt. Rachel covered her mouth with one hand, tears streaming freely. But it wasn't over. Braden stood up in the audience, raising his hand. Can I say something? He asked aloud. Miss Rodriguez looked surprised but nodded. Braden turned to face the stage. I made fun of Ethan before, about his lunch, but that was wrong. I didn't understand what it meant. Now I do, and, his cookies are seriously amazing. Laughter filled the room. Braden turned red but smiled anyway. After the presentation, Rachel met Miss Rodriguez in the hallway. Your son is a remarkable young man, the teacher said, her voice warm.
He's gone through a lot, but he's grown from it. He's a
quiet leader now, the kind that others watch and learn from. Thank you, Rachel said. That means more than I can say. They turned to see Ethan and Braden walking together, backpacks slung over their shoulders, discussing cookie recipes. That evening, Rachel sat in the kitchen with her apron tied, mixing dough while Ethan handled the cookie scoop. It had become their new after-school tradition. What do you think we should call them? Rachel asked. Ethan squinted. What? The cookies? Yeah, I mean, they've become kind of famous now, he grinned. Let's call them Team Miller's Special, Rachel laughed. Perfect. Later that night, as she folded laundry and double-checked Ethan's math contest registration, her phone buzzed. It was Nancy. Hey, I heard what happened today at the school. You must be so proud. I am. Well, I've been thinking, Nancy said. You remember the support group idea we talked about? For single mother nurses? I mentioned it to some others, and we want to do it. A monthly meeting, maybe even a shared childcare setup. Rachel's heart warmed. That's incredible. Count me in. Also, Nancy added with a teasing tone, you might have to bring cookies. They're becoming legendary. I'll bring 24. That night, after dinner and bath time, Ethan curled up next to Rachel on the couch, his head resting on her shoulder. Mom? Yeah, baby? I've been thinking about when I grow up. Oh, I think I want to be a doctor, or maybe a nurse, like you. I want to help people. Rachel ran her hand through his hair. That's a wonderful dream. But it costs money, right? College and stuff? It does, Rachel said honestly. But you know what? You're smart. And you're determined. There are scholarships, grants, and Mom's going to keep working hard. We'll figure it out together. He smiled and yawned. We're the best team, the best in the world. As Ethan drifted off to sleep in her arms, Rachel thought about the road ahead. There would be new challenges, always. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel afraid. She had her son. She had their team. And the truth finally was no longer hiding in the hallway. Winter in Madison crept in gently that year, a soft hush of snowflakes blanketing the rooftops and sidewalks, dusting the trees outside Rachel and Ethan's apartment like powdered sugar on a holiday cake. Inside their cozy kitchen, however, warmth flourished. Ethan stood on a stool beside his mother, carefully cracking eggs into a bowl while Rachel mixed the dry ingredients for banana bread. Laughter and music filled the air, Frank Sinatra humming through an old Bluetooth speaker, their routine soundtrack when baking. It was a small apartment, still the same narrow kitchen with scuffed linoleum and chipped countertops. But everything about it felt different now, lighter, brighter, full. Life had changed in the months since the incident at Madison Elementary. Some of those changes were simple. Ethan now opened his lunchbox every day with pride, often sharing a cookie or a kind word with classmates who used to ignore him. Other changes were profound. The school had implemented anti-bullying and bias training for all faculty. A formal apology had been sent to Rachel and Ethan from the district superintendent. And most significantly, Rachel had accepted a promotion to become head nurse of the night shift team, a raise that allowed for more security and flexibility in their lives. But the most important change of all had bloomed within Ethan himself. The shame that had once shadowed him had lifted. In its place stood a boy who smiled with the kind of confidence earned through pain, who had found his voice and used it not only for himself, but for others. He had become someone younger students looked up to. Miss Rodriguez, his new teacher, had even asked him to join the student peer mentor program. Rachel noticed how her son carried himself differently, now taller, not just in height but in spirit. He laughed more freely, he hugged her tighter. He studied harder, and when he talked about his future, he used the words when and I will. Not maybe and I hope. It was early February when Ethan came home waving a letter from the Wisconsin Math League. I made it to the finals again. He beamed, holding up the envelope like a golden ticket. Rachel pulled him into a hug. Ethan, that's amazing. We have a state competition next month. Miss Rodriguez said if I do well, there's a national event in D.C. They both paused for a moment. Washington, D.C. was far. Expensive, flights, hotels, fees. Rachel smiled even as her heart quietly braced itself. Then we'll do what we have to, one step at a time. That night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Rachel sat at the kitchen table with her notepad and calculator. She reviewed her budget. Her new salary helped, but it would still be tight. Then she thought of something. She reached for her phone and texted Nancy, Hey, remember that single mother support group idea? The next day, the group met for the third time at a community center near the hospital. There were 7 women in attendance, all single mothers, most of them nurses, some janitors or cafeteria staff from nearby schools. They came with strollers and toddlers, thermoses of coffee, and hearts full of stories. After Rachel shared Ethan's success and the possible trip to DC, the women began discussing ways to help. One offered to cover a few night shifts if Rachel needed time off. Another, who ran a weekend side business, suggested organizing a bake sale fundraiser. Within a week, the Cookies for Courage campaign was born. The idea was simple. Rachel and Ethan's homemade cookies, sold at school events and the hospital break room, with proceeds supporting Ethan's competition expenses. Miss Rodriguez championed the initiative at school, and the nursing staff posted photos of Ethan and Rachel's story near the hospital cafeteria. Even Braden's parents, now humbled and more community-minded after their previous arrogance, donated anonymously to the fund. The cookies sold out every day. Helped bake on weekends, learning how to measure precisely, fold dough, and package them with handwritten notes that read, "Thank you for supporting kids with big dreams." One day, Ethan asked, "Do you think we'll have enough for the trip?" Rachel checked the tin where they kept the earnings and nodded. "I think we already do." March arrived with cold mornings and hopeful skies. Rachel requested vacation time for the competition weekend, and the school arranged for Miss Rodriguez to chaperone. Before their flight, Rachel and Ethan sat on their couch with a bowl of popcorn between them, watching a YouTube video about Washington monuments. "Someday," Ethan whispered, "I'll come back here for college." "You will," Rachel replied, kissing the top of his head. "And I'll be your biggest cheerleader." The competition itself was held in a historic hall, filled with some of the brightest young students from across the country. Ethan was nervous but focused. He moved through the problems like a surgeon, methodical, calm, precise. Rachel watched from the audience with her fingers laced tightly in her lap, but when the final scores were tallied, she stood up with the rest of the crowd in roaring applause. "Second place," Ethan whispered, stunned, holding the silver trophy. "To me, you'll always be first," Rachel said, pulling him close. Back in Madison, they were welcomed home with banners in the hallway of the apartment building. Neighbors had joined the support group's efforts and decorated their door with balloons and a sign that read, "Welcome home, champ." Spring melted the snow, and with it Rachel felt her old fears fade too. One evening in April, Ethan brought home a permission slip for career day. He had signed himself up as a presenter. "I want to tell the class about nursing," he said. Rachel blinked. "You want to talk about my job?" "Yeah, I want people to know what you do, how much you help." Career day came. Ethan wore a small white coat borrowed from a costume store, a toy stethoscope around his neck. He introduced himself to the class and explained how his mom saved lives, helped the sick, and came home in the morning to make cookies and turkey sandwiches because love doesn't run out when you're tired. When he finished, the classroom erupted into applause. Miss Rodriguez later told Rachel, "Ethan made half the class want to be nurses." Rachel cried that night, but the good kind. The grateful kind. In May, the school hosted its annual awards ceremony. Among the usual medals from math, science, and sports, a new award was introduced, the Kindness and Courage Award, created by the faculty to recognize a student who had demonstrated emotional strength, leadership, and compassion. When Principal Anderson called Ethan's name, Rachel gasped. Ethan walked onto the stage, cheeks flushed. As the audience applauded, "This young man reminded us that strength doesn't always look loud," the principal said. "Sometimes it's quiet, steady, made of the stuff that doesn't give up." Rachel stood in the back, hands pressed to her mouth again. She thought about every moment they had lived through, the fatigue, the tears, the guilt, the fear. And she thought of the turkey sandwiches, the cookies, the small, quiet acts of love that had built their lives. Ethan turned to the crowd and spoke into the microphone, his voice strong. "I want to dedicate this award to my mom," he said. "She always tells me love is the most important ingredient in anything. I think that's true for lunch, for family, and for life." Rachel wasn't the only one crying. By summer, their story had quietly traveled far. A local news station did a segment titled "From Cookie Shame to Community Fame." Donations poured into the school's diversity programs. Rachel was invited to speak at a city conference for educators on parental resilience. And the Cookies for Courage fundraiser had become a quarterly event, now supporting a scholarship fund for low-income students at Madison Elementary. One warm July evening, Rachel and Ethan sat on the roof of their apartment building, eating ice cream and watching the stars come out. You know, Ethan said, I don't think I'd change anything, even the hard parts. Rachel asked, especially the hard parts, he replied. She looked at him, really looked. At his growing hands, his widening smile, the way he sat with ease in himself now. And she knew he wasn't just her son anymore. He was becoming his own person.
His own force. I love you, she said, tears catching in her lashes. I love you too, he whispered. And Mom? Yeah?
Tomorrow's lunch, can we make banana bread again? Rachel grinned. Of course. The next morning, Rachel packed his lunch as always. A sandwich, sliced fruit, and a carefully wrapped square of banana bread. She tucked in a note that said, You make me proud every single day. Love, Mom. As Ethan walked to the school bus, he turned back and shouted, I'll save you a cookie. Rachel waved, watching him disappear into the horizon of a new day. No one at school called his lunch a poor kid's lunch anymore. Now everyone knew the truth. It was the world's richest lunch, because it was made of love, the most luxurious ingredient of all.